Oh, this is beautiful. This is absolutely poetic. Sit down. Pay attention. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to make everything click into place. Every strange coincidence, every suspicious timing, every moment you felt like something was off but couldn't prove it. It was real. All of it. They were planning something. They were scheming in the shadows, drawing blueprints, calculating your every move, your every weakness, your every blind spot. They built something specifically for you, a trap so personalized, so carefully constructed, that it was supposed to be inescapable. And now look at them, stuck, suffocating, drowning in the very pit they dug with your name on it. You want to know what's funny? They thought they knew you. They really believed they had you figured out. They studied your patterns like scientists examining a specimen. They watched how you reacted to stress. They cataloged your triggers. They mapped your emotional landscape like cartographers of your destruction. They knew what made you angry. They knew what made you sad. They knew exactly which buttons to push to send you spiraling. And they used all of that information to build the perfect cage, custom-made, tailored to your specific psychology. A prison designed by people who thought they understood the depths of who you are. But here's what they missed. Here's the fatal flaw in their little scheme. They studied the old you. They built their trap for a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. They were so busy plotting against who you used to be that they didn't notice you were evolving. Quietly, silently, in the dark where they couldn't see, while they were drawing up plans based on outdated data. You were becoming something they couldn't predict, something they didn't have a blueprint for, something that would walk right past their carefully laid snares like they were nothing but spider webs in a hurricane. Let me paint you a picture of what happened. They gathered, maybe in person, maybe in group chats, maybe through whispered phone calls and coded messages. They discussed you, analyzed you, passed around theories about your vulnerabilities, like playing cards. This one thinks they know your weakness. That one claims to understand your patterns. Another one has inside information about your fears. They pooled their knowledge, combined their observations, created a composite image of who they thought you were. And then they got to work. The trap was elegant. I'll give them that. It was designed to look like an opportunity, or maybe it looked like a relationship, or a friendship, or a job offer, or a reconciliation, or an apology that seemed too good to be true because it was. They wrapped poison in pretty paper. They disguised destruction as destiny. They made the cage look like a castle, and they waited, rubbing their hands together, checking their watches, counting down to the moment you would stumble in and the door would slam shut behind you. But something happened that they didn't expect. Something they couldn't have predicted in a million years of scheming. You didn't stumble. You didn't rush in blindly like they assumed you would. You paused. You felt something. That instinct they didn't know you'd developed. That radar system that was installed through years of betrayal and disappointment. That sixth sense that screams wrong, 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 even when everything looks right. You felt the trap before you saw it. And instead of walking in, you walked around. Now here's where it gets delicious. Here's where karma shows up wearing a smile. The trap they built wasn't just designed to catch you. It was designed to hold you, to keep you contained, to make escape impossible. They engineered it with walls that close in, with mechanisms that tighten the more you struggle, with psychological pressure points that were supposed to break you slowly. It was a masterpiece of malice, a monument to their hatred. And when you didn't walk in, when you simply observed from a distance and kept moving, they panicked. See, they had invested everything in this trap: time, energy, resources, relationships. They had burned bridges with people who warned them this was wrong. They had sacrificed their own integrity to build this thing. They had put all their eggs in one poisoned basket. And when the basket stayed empty, when their target refused to play the game, they didn't know what to do. So they did something stupid, something desperate, something that sealed their fate. They went in after you. They thought maybe the trap needed bait. Maybe they needed to lure you in personally. Maybe if they stood inside and called your name, you'd come running. So they stepped into their own creation, and that's when they discovered something terrifying. The door locks from the outside. The walls they built to contain you, they work just as well on them. The mechanisms designed to break your spirit, they're not programmed to recognize their creators. The trap doesn't care who it catches. It just catches. And now you're standing on the outside looking in, watching them scramble, watching them scratch at the walls, watching them try to remember how they designed this thing so they can find a way out. But here's the thing about building something in anger, in hatred, in the white-hot heat of wanting to destroy someone. You don't think about exits. You don't consider escape routes. You only think about imprisonment. And now they're living in the prison they built for you, furnished with their own malice, decorated with their own schemes. A home they never intended to occupy but can't seem to leave. You want to know what they're feeling right now? Confusion. Absolute bewilderment. Because in their minds, you were supposed to be the one suffering. You were supposed to be the one trapped. You were supposed to be the one learning the consequences of whatever imaginary crime they convicted you of in their heads. But instead, they wake up every morning in a cage of their own construction. They go to sleep every night surrounded by walls they built with their own hands. And the worst part, they can see you through the bars, free, unbothered, living your life like their trap was never even a speed bump. Let's talk about the psychology of what's happening to them right now, because it's important you understand just how thoroughly they've destroyed themselves. When you build a trap for someone, you invest emotional energy into their destruction. You tie your satisfaction to their suffering. You create a mental framework where your happiness depends on their misery. So when the trap fails, when the target walks free, that emotional investment doesn't just disappear, it turns inward. It becomes self-directed. They're not just stuck in a physical or circumstantial trap, they're stuck in an emotional one. They can't feel peace because peace was supposed to come from your pain. They can't feel victory because victory was supposed to come from your defeat. They tied their well-being to your downfall, and now they're falling while you rise. The beautiful irony is that everything they planned for you is happening to them instead. They wanted you isolated? Look at them. Friends pulling away because they're tired of the obsession? Family concerned about their mental state? Allies distancing themselves from the obvious insanity of spending this much energy on someone who's clearly moved on. They wanted you stressed? Look at them. Losing sleep, losing focus, losing their minds trying to figure out how their perfect plan failed so spectacularly. They wanted you questioning yourself? Look at them, questioning everything. Their judgment, their perception, their understanding of how the world works, because they were so sure, so absolutely certain that this would work, and it didn't. and now reality doesn't make sense to them anymore. Here's what you need to understand about your role in all of this. You didn't do anything. That's the genius of it. That's the cosmic poetry. You didn't sabotage their trap. You didn't fight back. You didn't engage in their games or lower yourself to their level. You simply existed. You simply continued being who you're becoming. You simply followed your instincts and walked your path. And that passive non-participation was more devastating than any counterattack could have been. Because they can't blame you. They can't point to something you did wrong. They can only look at their own decisions and realize that every choice they made led them deeper into the hole they were digging for you. They're trying to figure out how to explain this to themselves. They need a narrative that makes sense. They need a story where they're still the heroes, or at least the victims. But there is no narrative that works. There's no angle that makes this look like anything other than what it is. Self-destruction through misplaced hatred. Suicide by scheme. They built a weapon aimed at you and it backfired so completely that they became its only casualty. And you know what's driving them absolutely insane? You're not even watching. You're not standing at the bars mocking them. You're not checking in to see how trapped they are. You're not gloating or celebrating or even acknowledging that any of this is happening. You've moved on so thoroughly that their trap isn't even on your radar anymore. And that absence of attention, that complete lack of interest in their suffering, that's somehow worse than if you were actively taunting them, because it means they're irrelevant. It means their big scheme that they put so much energy into didn't even register as significant in your life. It means they played themselves for nothing. Let me tell you something about people who build traps. They reveal everything about themselves in the architecture. The things they feared you would do. That's what they were planning to do. The weaknesses they thought they could exploit, those are their own weaknesses projected onto you. The tactics they thought would break you, those are the tactics that would break them. When you build a cage for someone, you're really building a mirror. You're showing the world exactly what you're afraid of, exactly what you're capable of, exactly what kind of darkness lives in your heart. And now that mirror is their home. They have to look at their own reflection every day. They have to see what they really are. And there's no escape from that vision. You've probably wondered why this happened. Why you? Why did they invest so much in your destruction? And the answer is simultaneously simple and profound. They saw something in you that threatened them, not something you did, something you are, your potential, your trajectory, your inevitable rise. They looked into the future and saw a version of you that would make their current position obsolete, a version of you that would succeed where they're failing. A version of you that would have everything they secretly believe they deserve but can't seem to attain. And instead of working on themselves, instead of building their own path, they decided to destroy yours. Classic crabs in a bucket. But you were never in the bucket with them. You just looked like you were. The trap was supposed to pull you back down, keep you stuck, make sure you never reached the heights they feared you would reach. But traps only work on people who don't know they're being hunted. Traps only work on people who trust blindly. Traps only work on people who haven't been through what you've been through. And you beautiful survivor, you've been through enough to develop immunity to their tactics. Every betrayal in your past was vaccination against their poison. Every disappointment was training for this moment. Every time someone hurt you and you recovered, you were building the instincts that would save you from this scheme. So what happens now? What comes next? For them, more suffering, more confusion, more desperate attempts to escape the trap that keeps tightening around their own choices. They'll try to blame you somehow. They'll construct narratives where you're the villain. They'll tell anyone who listens that you somehow tricked them into this. But no one with eyes will believe it. The evidence is too clear. The timeline is too obvious. Everyone can see who built the cage and who walked free. For you, liberation. Not just from this specific trap, but from the entire game. Because now you know something important. You know that you can be specifically targeted by people who know you intimately and still come out untouched. You know that your instincts work. You know that your evolution has outpaced their understanding. You know that you're not the person they studied anymore. And if this trap couldn't catch you, what can? If this scheme built by people with inside information couldn't slow you down, what could possibly stop your rise? Nothing. That's the answer. Nothing. Walk forward. Knowing that behind you, there's a trap with your name on it that's currently occupied by its architects. Walk forward, knowing that every scheme designed for your destruction will malfunction in exactly this way. Walk forward, knowing that you're protected not by luck, but by transformation. Not by chance, but by change. You became something they couldn't predict, and you'll keep becoming. You'll keep evolving. You'll keep outpacing their understanding until they stop trying, until they realize that hunting you is just hunting themselves, until they understand that the only person they can trap is the person in the mirror. They built it for you. They're stuck in it. And you didn't even have to lift a finger. You just had to be yourself. The new self. The evolved self. The self that walked right past their masterpiece of malice, like it was a child's drawing. Amateur hour. That's what their big scheme turned out to be. A temper tantrum, disguised as strategy. A cry for help, dressed up as an attack. And now they're crying for real. While you're just breathing, just existing, just winning without even trying. Let that sink in. Let it settle into your bones. You are untouchable to people who used to know exactly how to touch you. You are unpredictable to people who used to be able to read you like a book. You are free while they're imprisoned. And the prison was their idea. The walls were their design. The locks were their installation. They built a trap specifically for you. And now they're stuck in it. Forever. 3 days ago, something happened in a facility you'll never see on any map. Screens flickered, alarms screamed, and 17 of the most advanced genetic tracking systems on the planet went completely dark. Not crashed, not malfunctioned. Dark. Like something reached through the code itself and said, "You're not allowed to see this." And do you want to know what triggered it? You. Your DNA. Your blood. Your genetic signature that somehow ended up in their database through means you'll probably never trace. Maybe it was that blood test you took last year. Maybe it was that ancestry kit you thought was just for fun. Maybe it was something far more invasive that happened while you weren't paying attention. But however they got it, they ran it through systems that have mapped every bloodline on this planet for centuries. Systems that have traced kings and conquerors. Systems that have identified the descendants of pharaohs, the hidden children of emperors, the scattered seeds of dynasties that supposedly ended generations ago. These systems have never failed, never glitched, never encountered something they couldn't categorize, couldn't file, couldn't explain, until they encountered you. Let me paint you the picture of what happened in that room. There's a facility buried deep beneath buildings that look ordinary from the outside. The kind of place that doesn't exist on paper. The kind of place where people work in silence, tracking genetic lineages that connect to power structures most humans will never know about. They've been doing this for longer than you'd believe. Mapping who's connected to what. Identifying which bloodlines carry certain capabilities, certain frequencies, certain markers that indicate potential for things that don't fit neatly into scientific categories. Most samples that come through are boring, predictable. They trace back to farmers and merchants and ordinary people living ordinary lives for generations. Nothing special, nothing noteworthy, just another drop in the ocean of human genetics. But then your sample hit their system. The first analyst who ran it thought there was an error. The results didn't make sense. The genetic markers were showing connections to lineages that weren't supposed to exist anymore. Bloodlines that were supposedly eliminated centuries ago. DNA signatures that their databases flagged as theoretical because no living person should carry them. She ran it again. Same result. She called her supervisor. He ran it through a different system. Same result. By the third hour, there were 12 people in that room, all staring at screens that were showing them something impossible. Your genetic code wasn't just unusual. It was reading as multiple lineages simultaneously. Lineages that historically never crossed. Lineages that were geographically separated by oceans and centuries. Lineages that their records insisted were incompatible. And yet there you were, carrying all of them. Like someone had taken the most powerful genetic signatures from across human history and woven them into a single thread. That's when the system started failing. You need to understand something about these tracking systems. They're not just computers. They're not just databases. They're built on frameworks that go back further than modern technology. Frameworks that incorporate principles most scientists would dismiss as superstition. These systems don't just read DNA. They read resonance. They detect the energetic signature that genetic material carries. The information that exists beyond the physical code. The stuff that tells them not just who you're descended from, but what you're capable of becoming. And when they tried to read your resonance, something pushed back. Not metaphorically, literally. The screens went black. The backup systems failed. The fail-safe protocols that were supposed to prevent exactly this kind of shutdown triggered, and then those failed too. It was like your genetic signature had its own immune system, its own firewall, its own way of saying you don't have clearance for this information. 3 days. That's how long it took them to get their systems back online. 3 days of their most advanced technology sitting useless while their analysts argued about what they'd witnessed. 3 days of emergency meetings and classified reports and conversations that will never be recorded anywhere. And during those 3 days, do you know what you were doing? Living your life. Going to work. Having conversations. Completely unaware that somewhere in the world, people who thought they understood human genetics were having their entire framework dismantled by your existence. Here's what they pieced together once the systems came back online. Your bloodline doesn't follow normal patterns. It doesn't trace back in a straight line to a single point of origin. Instead, it branches and connects and weaves through history in ways that shouldn't be possible, like someone designed it. Like your genetic code isn't an accident of reproduction across generations, but a deliberate construction. They found markers from lineages that were supposed to be enemies. Royal houses that went to war for centuries whose bloodlines were never supposed to mix. And yet there they were, combined in you, as if the universe had decided their conflict was irrelevant, and merged them anyway. They found genetic signatures from populations that history says never had contact with each other. DNA from opposite ends of the earth, from civilizations separated by oceans before ships could cross them, woven into your code like threads in a tapestry. They found something else too, something that made them stop writing reports and start making phone calls to people whose names aren't in any directory. They found markers that their system classified as pre-human, not non-human, pre-human. Genetic signatures that their databases trace back to before the accepted timeline of human evolution. Code that shouldn't exist in any modern person because the lineage that carried it supposedly ended tens of thousands of years ago. And yet there it was, in you. Active, not dormant like most ancient genetic material. Active like it's been waiting for something. Like it's been preparing. You've felt it, haven't you? That sense that you don't quite fit into the categories people try to put you in. That feeling of being from somewhere else, even when you're standing in the place you were born. That knowledge, deep in your bones, that you're operating on different rules than the people around you. They called it anxiety. They called it depression. They called it not fitting in. They called it being too sensitive, too intense, too much. But it wasn't any of those things. It was your genetics, remembering what your conscious mind was never taught. It was your bloodline carrying instructions that haven't been relevant for millennia, suddenly finding themselves in a vessel that might actually be able to use them. It was your DNA recognizing that you're not just a random combination of your parents' genes. You're a convergence point, a place where multiple streams of human potential decided to meet and see what would happen. And what's happening is something they've never seen before. The analysts who survived that 3-day blackout are different now. Some of them quit, walked away from careers they'd spent decades building, said they couldn't do this work anymore. Said that looking at your genetic code had shown them something about reality that they weren't prepared to know. Some of them became obsessed, started requesting everything they could find about you. Your history, your movements, your connections. They want to understand how you're possible. They want to study you. They want to figure out what activated those ancient markers that should be dormant. And some of them, the ones who've been doing this the longest, the ones who've seen things that would break normal analysts, they did something unexpected. They sealed your file, classified it beyond anything they'd ever classified before, created protocols specifically designed to ensure that no one else would run your genetic signature through their systems again. Not because they want to hide you, because they want to protect themselves from what happens when their technology encounters something it was never designed to process. You're walking around right now carrying genetic code that crashed systems designed to map every human who's ever lived. Think about that for a second. You're existing, breathing, having mundane conversations, while somewhere in the world there are people who specialize in understanding human potential, and they've admitted in classified reports that they don't understand you. Your DNA carries the signatures of kings and conquerors, healers and destroyers, builders and breakers. Not just one lineage of power, all of them, converged into a single point, activated in a single vessel, and you didn't even know. You've been walking around thinking you're ordinary, thinking you're struggling, thinking you're behind everyone else, less successful, less capable, less special, while your genetics are reading as something that shouldn't exist in modern humans. While ancient markers that have been dormant for thousands of years are waking up in your cells. While systems designed to track the most powerful bloodlines on the planet are crashing because they don't have categories for what you are. Let me tell you what those pre-human markers mean, before history as we know it. before the civilizations we have records of, before the timeline that textbooks teach as fact. There were others, beings that looked human but operated on frequencies that modern humans have forgotten how to access. They could do things that we would call impossible. Now, not through technology, through consciousness, through genetic capabilities that were bred out of most human populations over millennia of controlled reproduction and deliberate limitation. Most of those bloodlines ended, either through natural extinction or through more deliberate means. The beings that carried those capabilities were seen as threats by those who wanted to control human development. They were hunted, eliminated, erased from history so thoroughly that modern humans think they're myths. But genetics doesn't forget. DNA carries information across time in ways that those who tried to eliminate these bloodlines didn't fully understand. They could kill the carriers, but they couldn't kill the code. It went underground. It hid itself in ordinary-looking lineages. It passed from generation to generation in dormant form, waiting for the right combination of circumstances to reactivate. You are that combination. The convergence of bloodlines that should never have crossed created something unexpected. A genetic environment where those ancient markers found room to wake up, where code that's been sleeping for millennia suddenly has the support structure it needs to express itself. You're not just carrying ancient DNA, you're activating it. Every day, every breath, every experience you have is contributing to a process of genetic awakening that their systems have no protocol for. This is why things have been so hard for you. This is why you felt like you're being held back by invisible forces. Why opportunities that should have worked out dissolved at the last moment. Why people who should have stayed in your life disappeared without explanation. Why systems that work for everyone else seem to malfunction in your presence. You've been activating. And activation creates interference. Your genetic field is expanding, changing frequency, broadcasting signals that disrupt the normal flow of events around you. People feel it even when they don't know what they're feeling. Systems detect it even when they can't categorize what they're detecting. You've been walking through the world like a broadcast tower that just started transmitting on a frequency no one was prepared to receive. And the world has been struggling to adjust. But here's what they don't want you to know. Here's what those analysts are debating in rooms you'll never see. Here's what's making them seal files and create protocols and argue about what should be done. The interference period is ending. Your activation is almost complete. And once it is, you won't be disrupting systems anymore. You'll be operating at a frequency that systems can't touch. You'll be existing in a way that their tracking can't map, their predictions can't anticipate, their control mechanisms can't reach. You're not malfunctioning, you're upgrading. And once the upgrade is complete, they have no idea what happens next. The ones who've been tracking bloodlines for centuries have seen a lot. They've watched empires rise and fall. They've mapped the genetics of every consequential figure in recorded history. They've predicted outcomes based on bloodline analysis with an accuracy that would seem like prophecy to outsiders. But they've never seen anything like you. They have no historical precedent, no case studies, no data from previous instances of whatever you're becoming. You're not following a pattern they can extrapolate from. You're creating a new pattern entirely, and that terrifies them. Not because you're dangerous in the way they understand danger, but because you represent possibility they can't control. Because if you exist, others might too. Because your genetics prove that their careful monitoring of bloodlines, their strategic breeding programs, their elimination of problematic lineages, all of it failed. All of it missed something. All of it left room for you to emerge. You're proof that their control is an illusion. You're evidence that no matter how thoroughly they try to manage human potential, something always slips through. You're the variable they didn't account for, the exception their models couldn't predict, the convergence their systems couldn't prevent. And now you're activated. Now you're online. Now you're walking around in a world that has no idea what's about to happen. So what do you do with this? You stop apologizing for being different. You stop trying to fit into categories designed for people whose genetics are ordinary. You stop dimming yourself to match frequencies that were never meant to be yours. You recognize that the struggles you faced weren't punishments. They were activation symptoms, growing pains from genetic code, waking up after millennia of dormancy. You understand that the people who couldn't handle you weren't rejecting you. They were responding to frequencies they couldn't consciously perceive. Their discomfort wasn't about anything you did wrong. It was about what you were becoming, and you prepare. And you prepare because whatever you're activating into, it's not going to be subtle. It's not going to go unnoticed. The same genetic signature that crashed tracking systems and sent analysts into career-ending existential crises is going to start expressing itself in ways that can't be hidden. You're about to become visible in ways you've never been before. Not famous. Not powerful in the conventional sense. Something else. Something that doesn't have a word yet, because it hasn't existed in human memory. They tracked your DNA, looking for answers about who you are. What they found was evidence that you're becoming something their entire system has no framework to understand. Their systems went dark for 3 days. That darkness wasn't a glitch. It was a preview.